Hi, thank you for joining us. So could you just first say your name and position in the district?
Sure. My name is Heather Esposito. I am the district teacher technology coach for all 19 schools in the district. I've been doing this the past 3 years, but before that, I taught English for 20 years at West.
Great, thank you. And
hmm
I am Aiden Rood, Editor-in-Chief with Eastside. Great to be here with you to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and how it is impacting the field of education. Eastside has done some significant reporting on this issue that will be coming out soon, and we wanted to talk to you to get your perspective on how artificial intelligence is interacting with teachers, students, and education in general. So first, could we
Okay,
just have some general thoughts from your perspective
sure.
about how this technology will make an impact.
Sure. So there's a lot to unpack. So a few weeks ago, I attended a conference where it was all about educational technology and the future of learning. And so AI was obviously a big topic. One of the things that was touched upon is the fact that AI is what's considered a hard trend, meaning there's no stopping it. It's been coming for a while, it's been adapting for a while, and it's with us to stay. The implications for that in the immediate is that is something that students and teachers and educators, both in the primary high school level and even in post-secondary, are going to have to figure out how to work with. Um, and by working with it, there are things that we can do up front to kind of adapt and adjust. There's also some things that we can do to look ahead and see how we can kind of adjust our curriculum and our instruction and kind of utilize it to the best of our ability. In that it's a hard trend, what that means is the jobs of the future are going to rely heavily on AI. So we can't deny it. We have to learn to embrace it because it's part of your future. So it was a really interesting analogy that was shared with us that I think kind of holds true for how to embrace it. In that, if you think about the medical world, you have doctors who are trained to be experts in their medical field. And then you have the development of AI robots who can do what doctors can do to the same extent and sometimes even better. Now, if you had to pick, what would you pick? Well, if you could, you'd probably pick the combination, right? You would want that human aspect, the person who has empathy and feelings and can adapt on the fly with those years of experience, but also knowing that there's that computer intelligence that exists that is constantly evolving. But when you blend them together, it really creates the best result. So the same thing could be said for students and teachers. Taking the tried and true and the traditional approach, our feelings and emotions, our ability to be divergent thinkers, and marrying that with the technology that exists should be kind of the direction that we're heading in.
That makes sense. So, in terms of your view on embracing AI in education, what does that look like in terms of some of the controversial elements of AI in education right now around the ideas of plagiarism, cheating, students doing their own work, where some teachers and some people in general are viewing the use of AI as cheating.
hmm
Others think that there's a balance, and some teachers are trying to eliminate it entirely by having
Right.
essays that might in the past have been written on a computer go to paper and pencil, and then other teachers are fully embracing it. So how does that
Yeah.
issue play into this?
So when I think about it, that anytime there's a period of change, we have a mixed bag of feelings. It can be scary. It could be, like everything I've done for so many years, you're asking me to change all at once. And I think with any change like this, it's an evolution. And so if somebody's saying, like, for the time being, I want to try to do things more paper-based, to kind of think about how to evolve my toolbox or what I'm doing, then that's fine for the time being. But I don't think that's the answer in the long term, nor is blocking. Anytime we're asked to block something, we know that there are workarounds. And so blocking it isn't going to really impede anyone from using it. And the same thing goes for there are a lot of these generators out there that can supposedly track human versus AI, and they are very flawed. So we don't want to rely on that either. To kind of think about where to position this. So I was in high school in the 90s when the internet was new. And I remember being in my school library and there was like one computer that had the internet, and everyone's like, what does this mean? What does this mean for finding information? And, um, you know, will we have to look at books anymore? Like, what does it mean? And that fear turned into a sense of like excitement eventually. And then it also created more conversations. Like, now that we can get all this information at once, now we have to figure out ways to decipher what's good, what's not good. So the same can be said for AI. It can produce a paper for us. And on one hand, that's frightening. And on the other hand, it's kind of amazing, and it kind of makes us think, well, what do we do with that? So I've done a lot of like practice generating. I've asked it to create outlines for me. I've asked it to create responses to prompts. And I think that there's a lot that you can work with. So it will generate an essay, it will generate a response, but it lacks description, it lacks voice, which is huge. Sometimes it gets things wrong. It gets math problems wrong a lot. It gets facts wrong. Um, it definitely doesn't decipher bias. So you have to remember, like, the AI is pulling from sources that were written to a certain extent by people, and those people have biases. So even if it does generate a response, there's a lot we can do with that. So we can break it down. Where are the biases? Where are the gaps? Um, what was the question we asked it, and did it actually produce an answer to that question that makes sense? So in a way, it's going to help us maybe become better critical thinkers. Going back to that internet analogy about deciphering what's good and what's not, it's going to make us be a little bit more critical about what we're getting and how we can use that. And then, as a former English teacher, one of the hardest things ever to teach was helping students develop a voice in writing. And AI cannot generate voice. It can't really generate your authentic humor, your authentic sarcasm. So the fact that that's that big gaping hole that's missing is a unique opportunity to focus on something that was difficult to do so before. So I feel like wherever people are right now that makes them feel comfortable, that's okay and that's normal. But as far as saying, we're going to block it, we have to just return to pen and paper forever. The internet never went away. The internet never, it wasn't, it evolved. And now, the statistics say that 65% of the jobs of the future don't exist yet. And the reason why they don't exist yet is because your generation hasn't created them yet. So if we take these tools away from you, we're only doing you a disservice.
Hmm. And so, in terms of the positives, you talked about the amazing power of AI and also these negatives in terms of bias and other problems. What are some ways that educators and users of AI can lean into the positives and can combat the negatives?
So I actually, I've been doing a lot of research, and I think it's an interesting place to start with what Chat GPT and things like that can't do, right? So sometimes we say, okay, it can do this, it can make us an outline, but if you think about what it can't do, that might very well be a good place to start. So Chat GPT cannot write a self-reflection. So for instance, you could do something like describe how the content that was covered in class shifted your thinking about your role, or you put in a few questions in Chat GPT because you can regenerate responses. Look at all three generations of the responses. What did you learn from each? How does one maybe weigh more heavily on your opinion than the other? And therein, and kind of looking at what it generates, develop your own unique perspective on it. So kind of utilizing what it has, what it doesn't have, could spark new questions, could actually turn it more onto the student. Like, what are your thoughts on this? Can you generate a new question based off of the information you received? Another interesting thing is that it can't write about anything that happened after 2021. It can't provide non-text based responses. So what that's telling me is if we take a more multimodal approach, so here's some information we're learning. We want you to think about creating an infographic. And after you've created your infographic, if you could create, a response where you explain your thinking that went into creating this infographic, like why this certain statistic was really dominant in your infographic. What was your reasoning behind that? Or, taking something and turning it into a podcast or a video. So there's some things we can do to kind of deal with what it doesn't do, and at the same time looking at what it does do and using that to our advantage. So a lot of us are thinking about what it can create for us, but there's also, if you kind of flip it around, what we can ask it to do. So for instance, when I was in the English classroom, we studied the hero's journey. You probably remember that from ninth grade. So I kind of was like, you know what? If I was new to learning the hero's journey and I wanted to learn it from a perspective that was interesting to me, I said, explain the hero's journey to a 10-year-old who likes to play video games. So what it did is it broke down the hero's journey, but it created an analogy to video games, which for me, if I was a 10-year-old or however, and I like to play video games now, wait, this is actually starting to make more sense to me, right? So take any complicated topic that you're learning, you could actually use this as a study aid to help it make more sense to you, right? At the same time, where it's telling us teachers can create quizzes and assessments with ChatGPT, you could create them for yourself as a way to study and prepare. Create an easy quiz on whatever. Now, you're gearing up to a big assessment, create a challenging quiz for me. And it's a way for you to actually like leverage that information to challenge yourself. But it was interesting. I had it explain the hero's journey as a 10-year-old who likes to play video games, as a 15-year-old who likes to read manga. And I asked it to generate it like 3 different times. And each time it explained it to me in a different way. So what do I do with that? Well, I could use that and weave together a few different versions to kind of make my own analysis. I thought it was really cool. I would never have thought of that otherwise. But I don't think that the possibilities are endless. I also had it generate an outline for me. So a couple weeks ago, I was preparing for a presentation on the future of learning. So I said, can you make an outline for me to present the future of learning? And it was great. It was very objective. It included some topics that I forgot about. Did it expand on any of them really well? No. Did it provide the anecdotes and the nuances? Did it know that I went into a classroom and talked about this? No. Yeah, that's where I could add my personal approach to it. So those are just a couple examples of how it could be used, but both by teachers and by students.
Yeah, those are all really interesting ideas. And then finally, I was just wondering, in these early stages of the technology, what does this look like in practice? In your position working with teachers, what have you done so far to help teachers understand this technology, and what does your day-to-day work look like when it comes to AI?
So right now, it's definitely in its inception. So to this point, I've just been kind of sharing resources with teachers. I do a monthly newsletter. So I put together some resources, both explaining the AI at its inception, because teachers are very busy and a lot of them haven't really had a chance to even dissect what it is.
Mhm.
So I want to make sure people have a clear understanding. And then kind of in piecemeal, sharing some of these different strategies that might be helpful, so that teachers can kind of be proactive and think about some things to do, as they look at their like upcoming curriculum and think about maybe I want to tweak this writing assignment, or a lot of times I say, you know, it's not a bad thing to give your students an opportunity to play around with it and learn from what your students are saying, because I feel that when you give kids a chance to kind of take ownership and be the trailblazers in figuring it out, that you could learn a lot from what your students have to share. Like, hey, Mrs. Esposito, I just figured out that, Chat GPT can start building a resume for me. Look what it did. And maybe that will kind of spark an idea that all students can get involved in. Another thing I've been sharing, because I'm really big on inquiry design, is maybe this is an opportunity, instead of teachers kind of saying, here are your topics that we want you to investigate, is giving kids a chance to develop solutions to problems that matter to them, and kind of take that inquiry-based journey. And that can work well in just about any content area if given the opportunity. So I've just been kind of sparking the ideas, kind of being a repository. And eventually I hope to be able to get into more classes and then work side by side with some teachers to revamp some activities and assignments.
Okay, well, I have one last question, which is
Sure.
a question we've been asking students at East in a small survey, and we've gotten very mixed responses. And I just wanted to ask for your thoughts on, ultimately, in the big picture, do you think that the emergence of this new technology, artificial intelligence, is going to have a positive impact or a negative impact on the world, and specifically the world of education?
I think it's going to have a positive impact. But if you, as most people who know me know, that I've decided to take a very asset approach to how education is evolving, rather than a deficit approach. So I tend to look at what we can harness, how we can utilize the technology, and how we can potentially anticipate problems, and how to, take a problem and change it and find a way to make it work. I think a lot of that is giving students a chance to have a role in coming up with solutions to the problem. Um, Having students delve into different opportunities to use AI, because we don't know what we don't know, and we won't know it until we try it. So I think because we know that it is a hard trend that's not going away, that's going to ultimately be a huge part in whatever you decide to do, that we have to embrace it. And we can embrace it in various degrees. As the technology person, I tend to get right at the end of the diving board and jump right in. But if you're at the back and you're nervous, then just dip a toe in and feel it out and then go from there. So, um, with any new change, it's going to breed a little bit of apprehension, but I think it's going to overall be a good thing for everyone.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all your insight. Thank you for joining us
Sure.
for this Eastside interview. It was great talking to you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. No problem.